A report by the U.S. Census Bureau shows that President Trump's tiff with Trudeau could spell trouble for individual states' economies. Have a look at this map, breaking down states by their largest trading partner. 32 of them have Canada as their biggest export customer. With more on this, I want to bring in Bob Bryan. He's a policy reporter with Business Insider. He joins me from New York. Brian, good morning. Excuse me. Thank you very much for being with us. Bob, I called you Brian. Sorry.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
We won't call each other by our last names just yet. Okay. Tell us a little bit more about these numbers. What are the big takeaways from the U.S. Census Bureau report?
So basically, this U.S. Census Bureau report just shows how important Canada is as a trading partner for a lot of individual U.S. states. As you mentioned, 32 states in the U.S. in 2016 counted Canada as their top export destination. And even going further than that, 8 other states counted it as the #2 export destination, and all but, Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and Hawaii had Canada in their top 4 export destinations. So a lot of these states' economies, a lot of jobs in these states rely on exporting goods to Canada.
And not to get too bogged down in numbers here, but 20 of those 32 states that count Canada as their biggest export destination voted for Trump in 2016. Do you see support shifting?
I don't necessarily. The tariff policy and Trump's trade policies haven't been polling great in the U.S. It's tough to break that out state by state. But overall, there's not a big appetite. You see individual cases of farmers saying that they're worried about the goods that they send to Canada and they voted for Trump. So there's anecdotal data that this isn't going over very well right now. But in terms of a sea change, we're not necessarily seeing that in the data.
President Trump has been harping on a trade deficit with Canada when, in fact, there was an $8.4 billion surplus. How would these numbers change with new tariffs on Canadian imports?
It's tough to know exactly how they would change, but it definitely would kind of bring down the overall flow of goods across the border. And you'd probably see a lot of generally, I think you wouldn't necessarily see a big difference in the deficit just because it's that a lot of economists say that tariffs are and trade deficits are kind of domestic policies, the fact that Americans just consume a lot of goods, so we do run a lot of trade deficits. So a lot of economists are saying that the trade deficit isn't really going to budge because of these new tariffs.
After this past weekend, how likely is it that the U.S. and Canada will engage in a full-blown trade war, not just political posturing?
I think it's getting to be a real possibility now. I mean, we've already seen that the U.S. applying tariffs. I know Canada, their timeline is July 1st. So we probably need to see a little bit more bigger tariffs going back and forth than just what we're seeing right now. But the U.S. is already investigating, looking into putting in tariffs on imports of autos. And, car and auto imports are one of the biggest, import goods going in between the NAFTA countries. So I think if we see the Trump administration place those auto tariffs onto goods from Canada, onto those vehicles from Canada, that's kind of your sense that a real trade war is happening.
Okay. Bob Bryan joining us from Business Insider's magazine. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for